Yes, today is it your class? 12th class? Guys, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Today is it your class?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this. Today is Saturday. Okay, okay. So we'll just wait for a few moments for your people to join and we'll start. One, two, three, four. Only four of you. Okay. Guys, if you have your friends' number, just give them a call or give them a text, wake them up, and ask them to come to the class. So last minute, okay. If nobody joins, we'll start with the class. And by 7, we'll start the class. And by the time you can text your friends or call them, please do that if you have their numbers. Any idea? Will they join your friends? Any friend of yours? Did they say something? Aditi, your friends? The other two girls? Did they say anything?
I don't know them, sir.
Oh, okay, cool. Fine then, people. I think four of us is enough for four of you or enough for me. We'll start right away. So let me share my screen. Okay, hope you're able to see my screen. Let me flip my screen. Okay, so if you can remember, we have been seeing about chemical bonding, right? So we finished your valence bond theory, Lewis theory, VSEPR theory, theory of hybridization, and we decided what are the geometries, shapes, and all that. And last class, I taught you two main things. That is about dipole moments, right? And second thing which we saw was how do you compare the bond angles, right? How do you compare the bond angles if I give you so many things, right? So we discussed almost everything, right? And at the last, I told you that I'll be giving you the shortcuts for deciding the, or to compare the bond lengths, so not bond lengths, bond angles, right? So the first one, what you have to remember is people, um, when I talk about the electronegativity, right? Electronegativity. Now, electronegativity of the central atom, or say now we'll take the bonding atoms, electronegativity of the side atoms, right? So now if you looked at the example, say I had NH3 and I had NF3, right? Now what happened there, people? Or say when I compare forget about NH3, I can even take NCl3, right? Now which had more bond angle? NH3 or NF3? Which had more bond angle? See, guys, we have. Oh,
NCl3.
yeah, correct. Srivatsan is yet to respond, sir. Okay, cool, no issues, right? So yeah, as you said, yes, NCl3 is going to have more bond angle because I told you that both fluorine and your chlorine both have lone pairs, right? But the lone pair interactions between the chlorines are going to be greater, pushing the bond far away from each other. So obviously, you see that. What is that? NCl3 will have more bond angles. So what I can understand from this is that if the electronegativity of the side atoms increases, the bond angle also increases. This is the first trick which you can remember, right? Electronegativity of the side atom, if it increases, right? Say in this case, oh, sorry. It's inversely related, right? Chlorine is less electronegative. I'm sorry. Right? It is inversely related to the bond angle. Correct? Because chlorine is less electronegative and that is having more bond angle. NCl3 is having more bond angle. So whenever the electronegativity of the side atom increases, your bond angle decreases, or say if it decreases, the bond angle increases. Right? This is the first thing which you have to remember. Right? Okay. Second thing is that if I talk about the electronegativity of the central atom, if I put Ca means central atom, right? So electronegativity of the central atom. Now you can remember I had PH3 and I had say NH3, right? Now what happened there? Or if I have PCl3 and NCl3, whatever it is. Now what is going to happen there? Phosphorus is going to have a lone pair, nitrogen is going to have a lone pair, but since phosphorus is having more size, right? And what is going to happen? This lone pair is going to have lone pair bond pair interactions more because the lone pair is still more diffused. Correct, right? So whenever the electronegativity of central atom increases or decreases, what do you think? Now, obviously, PH3 will have lesser bond angle. If you can remember the properly shapes, right? This would have been the shape of PH3. So what happened? This and your bond pair here are are going to undergo repulsion, more repulsion than in the case of NH3. So what is going to happen? These bonds are going to come closer. So what happened to the bond angle? Bond angle is reducing, right? So whenever you have electronegativity, so what is happening? Nitrogen is more electronegative and that is having more bond angle. And PH3, phosphorus is less electronegative and that is having less bond angle. So electronegativity of central atom, if it increases, the bond angle also increases. Is that okay? Right? So these two are the simple tricks. Okay, now if I ask you, let me ask you a question. Say, okay, let me ask you this. I'll just give you a random compounds and I want you to arrange them in the order of their bond angles. If I ask you that, say I have SO4 2 minus, ClO3 minus, ClO2 minus, BF3. Okay, I think you're not able to see it. This is BF3. And say one more I'll take. It is say H2O. No, I will take ClO2 minus. Okay, I'll take CO2. Okay, so now I have all these compounds. Take few minutes, right? I mean, I'll not take few minutes. It is pretty easy, right? So I want you to tell me the order of bond angle for all of these. Arrange them in the order of bond angle. Either ascending order or descending order, doesn't matter. Just arrange them in the order of bond angle. All these things. So obviously you have to know the hybridization, you have to know the shape, and then you have to know the geometry, all these things, and obviously then you have to apply VACPR, right? And then only you can answer these kind of questions. So the best way to go about it is just look at the table and try to fit these compounds in whatever the types we have seen, AB2L3 or AB4 or something, right? Yes. Okay. Now let me ask you the easiest question. Which among this is going to have the maximum bond angle? Yes. Which among all these five will have maximum bond angle? Is it that much of a tough question? ClO3 minus. Okay. Fine. ClO3 minus is not the answer actually. Anybody else? Which among this is going to have maximum bond angle? Yes, Siddharth, you're right. CO2 is the one, right? So I know what is the shape of CO2, right? So let me make a page maybe. Right? So if you look at CO2, I know it is going to be linear, is it not? Right? The shape is going to be linear shape. So obviously, what is the bond angle? Bond angle is 180 degree. That's the highest, right? So for the maximum bond angle among all these five is going to go for what is it? Carbon dioxide, CO2, 180 degree linear molecule, right? Okay. Now say I'll take one by one and see what is the thing. So if I take SO42 minus, this is how it's going to look. Okay. So this is my SO42 minus, people. Right. Now, if you look at this, tell me whether sulfur has any lone pair here or not. Does sulfur have lone pair on this SO42 minus? Guys, does sulfur have lone pair on NSO42 minus?
No, sir.
Yeah, right. So yes, right. So how will I calculate? So sulfur has 6 valence electrons. It belongs to oxygen family. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Right. So totally 6 bond pairs are there. So there is no chance that I can have a lone pair. So this is of the type AB4. Right. Sulfur in the middle. 4 oxygen atoms. What is the shape? AB4.
Tetrahedral.
Obviously, right? So tetrahedral. So what is the bond angle then?
109.5.
Yeah, absolutely. 109.5 degrees. Okay, so this is my SO4 2 minus. Okay, then say I will take, I think ClO4 minus. If I take ClO4 minus, I have, oh no.
The ClO3, sir.
Oh, it's ClO3, yeah? Okay, fine, no issues. Okay. Right, so this is a negative charge, right? So this is my ClO3 minus, right? Now tell me, look at this and tell me whether I have any lone pairs on this. Which type I can fit into this? AB2L, something like that. Which type this belongs to? Think and tell me. Obviously, it's pretty straightforward that I'm going to have 3 bonding atoms. Do I have any lone pair on chlorine?
No, sir.
How many valence electron chlorine has?
7.
7 valence electrons. How many of them are involving in bonding here? How many bonds are there?
5.
Right? So how many lone pairs?
2.
2, sir.
2 electrons. How many lone pairs?
1 lone pair.
Absolutely. Right. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 bonds out of 7. 5 are involving in bonding. So this comes under the type what? AB3L. Correct. So this is like ammonia. Is it not? Ammonia NH3, and ammonia is also going to have 3 bonding atoms and 1 lone pair. So obviously the bond angle is going to be less than 109.5 degrees. We don't know the exact bond angle, but I can say that it is going to be lesser than 109.5 degrees. Cool, right? Okay, now let me take ClO2. ClO2 minus. Why is it happening like this? Okay, so now if you look at this, this is ClO2 minus, right? Now tell me how many lone pairs, quick.
2 lone pairs.
Yeah, totally. I had 7 valence electrons. Out of that, 1, 2, 3. 3 are involving in bonding. So 4 electrons are left out. So 2 lone pairs, right? So this is of the form what? AB2L2. Yes. So what would have been the example which we took for AB2L2? Do you remember the famous example for AB? Absolutely, right? So H2O is a very good example. So when I compared H2O with NH3, what happened? Here I have 2 lone pairs, right? So ammonia, or in this case, I have only one lone pair. Here I have lone pair interaction. So obviously the bond angle would be lesser than ClO3 minus, right? If you can remember, the bond angle of water was 105, and for that of ammonia was around 107. Right? So obviously this is going to have lesser bond angle because I have one more lone pair than the previous case, right? Okay, what about the last one? I think I don't even have to draw. What is the shape? What is the bond angle? Quick, BF3. I want to know the shape and I want to know the bond angle. Quick. What is the shape? What is the bond angle? BF3.
the trigonal planar.
Yeah, correct. 120, Akshay, you're right. Yes, it's trigonal. What? What are the trigonal? Yeah, trigonal planar. Absolutely. Right.
Planar.
Yeah, trigonal planar. Correct. What you told is correct. Right. So this will be trigonal planar. This is of the type AB3. There are totally three valence electrons for boron, and all the three are involving in bonding, so no one pairs. So this is going to be trigonal planar, obviously with a bond angle of 120. That's it. Now you can easily assign your ranks, right? So the maximum bond angle is for this one, and this like a second bond angle is for this 2, and this is exactly 109, and these two, and this is exactly 109, and these two are lesser than 109. So the third rank goes to this, and this and this, mean this and this. Obviously, this is having more bond angle. So fourth rank goes to this, and the least bond angle is for ClO2 mines. Any questions? Everybody understood? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay, cool. So this is how you already don't know people. If you don't know the hybridization, if you don't know the the shapes, you will not be able to answer these kind of questions. Simple question, right? So if at all this question was given to me, I don't even have to draw the structures. I can just tell, this is the thing, because I'm so much practiced. And the same thing will happen to you if you practice. If you're not going to practice, you have to draw the structure, you have to think of the hybridization, all these stuff, like so many things you have to do. But if you're gonna do it right at the time of the exam, I'm telling you that's the most stupidest thing you can ever do to yourself, right? So please practice. See, these are all scoring subjects. I mean, scoring areas. Easy, just like that. 4 marks, 3 marks, or whatever it is, you'll be able to get, right? Fine. So I think I gave you an idea how to approach these kind of problems, bond angle problems, or even the shapes, or whatever it is, right? Okay, done. So anything else in this I have to speak? No, right? Fine. Now, so we have completed VACPR and theory of hybridization. Okay. Now you saw that it is actually going to give me so much information. It talks about the bond angles. It talks about the bond length, not bond lengths, in the sense how covalent bond is formed, the law of octet, how is it getting violated, but still the molecule is stable, right? So all these things, so much information is actually giving me VACPR and theory of hybridization. But still, right? But still, it doesn't give me some of the information like the magnetic properties, right? So you know that there can be something called as paramagnetic species, diamagnetic species, all these things. So that is not told, right? And the strength of the bonds, right? So I know that if this is going to make a bond, all these things are going to happen. But what about when I compare S double bond O and Cl double bond O, which is going to be stronger, right? So that kind of idea it doesn't give, right? So all these things are the little drawbacks are there for VACPR and what is the theory of hybridization. But it's not like we're going to exclude it. You even now I'm doing a PhD. Still I'm still using this VACPR and stuff like all these things to predict the bond angle. It's useful, right? But if you wanna go in depth about these bonds as such, the next theory which you're gonna see, right, is really gonna be helpful in the sense that's the most accepted theory. Again, that has its own shortcomings. At least I mean that doesn't give me the shape of the molecule, the all these things. That it doesn't give, but it gives other kind of information. So all the theories put together, right? When you're going to investigate a new molecule, that you found a new molecule and you want to investigate it, right? All these theories are going to be helpful. It's not like one theory is greater than the other one. Okay, right? So we'll move on to the next theory, which is going to help us. Right? I'm sorry. So that is what is my MOT, molecular orbital theory, right? Obviously, you have studied about it, right? So it's a molecule. Now, in case of a theory of hybridization, we saw about hybridized orbitals, right? But that is a pure mathematical picture. I would say it's not reality. In reality, it's not actually happening. It's just a pure mathematical concept, right? But molecular orbitals, again, I would say, through the quantum mechanical calculations, I'll be able to see it, visualize it mathematically, but whether it happens in reality, only God knows, right? Okay. Right. So we already know some glimpse about this molecular orbital theory. Anyways, I'll just give a brief introduction about this. Right. So like here also, atomic orbitals are going to combine together, just like in theory of hybridization. Right. So here also some of the atomic orbitals are gonna come together and form something called as molecular orbital. Right. But here, what you have to understand is when I say atomic orbitals are like adding up, like say interacting, right? So it's not like, what do you think is interacting? See, please understand, if you can remember your Schrodinger's equation, right, in your atomic structure chapter, you'll be studying this, right? You must have remember this word psi, the Greek letter, right? So psi, if you can remember, this is what is called as your wave function, isn't it? Right, this particular thing is what is called as wave function, right? So depending on how this wave looks for each and every orbital, based on this only actually you'll be putting up the shapes. So we say that the s orbital is spherically symmetric because the wave of that is going to be such like that, and we say the p orbitals are dumbbell shaped, again the wave function is such that. So that's how it works, right? So so this is what we are going to speak about. So when I say two orbitals are going to mix up together to form a molecular orbital, what you have to understand is it is not exactly the orbitals, right? It is actually these waves which are going to interact with each other, right? And that is gonna say, if I have two waves adding or subtracting, you will form some other kind of wave, right? Say if I add two waves, you can get a bigger wave. When I subtract two waves, subtract in a single, I'll tell you what you mean by adding and subtracting, right? So you can get a smaller wave, right? So all these things can happen, right? So I think in your physics, right, you should have heard this term, and I think it will be pretty easy for me to explain if you know this. Right? You must have definitely know this phenomena, interference. Yes? What is that? Wave optics? Is it done? Guys,
Yes, sir.
in your school? Right. So obviously, you know what interference is, right? So I'm going to have two waves, right? Obviously, I can have two types of interference. That is my constructive interference and destructive interference, right? I don't have to go to this thing. Maybe I can explain you if you want. Let's simply, I can explain you like this. Say if I have a wave like this, right? And say I have another wave like this. Okay. Now, if they constructively interfere, right? What do you mean by constructively interfere? The maxima and the maxima will interact together, and the minima and the minima will interact together. Correct. So this is going to produce a big wave, right? This is going to produce a very big wave like this, right? Because the positive got added and the negative got added. This is my constructive interference. Okay, this is my constructive interference, right? Now, what can happen if it is destructive interference? Now, it will be little opposite. Say something like this, like when I have the crust of one wave and the trough of another wave, if they interact, right? So that is going to produce me smaller waves. Correct. So that is my destructive interference, right? So this exact same thing is what we are going to take in case of your wave functions also. So the orbitals in the form of their waves are going to undergo two types of interference. One is a constructive interference. The other one is a destructive interference, right? So obviously, accordingly, you can have two types of molecular orbitals, right? So the two types of orbitals are going to be called as bonding orbitals, bonding molecular orbitals, and I have something called as anti-bonding molecular orbitals. This you already know. Right? So obviously bonding molecular orbitals comes out of constructive interference, and sorry, your anti-bonding molecular orbitals comes out of destructive interference, right? And obviously bonding molecular orbitals are more stable, so they will have lesser energy, and anti-bonding molecular orbitals are unstable, right? So obviously they will have more energy. Obviously, you know, stability and energy are inversely related. Higher the energy, less the stability. Okay, right? Now, you actually, it's for advanced, if you go to JEE Advanced, they might even ask you what is the shape of the molecular orbitals, right? So we'll spend some time on knowing that, because the other things you know, right? You know how to fill the what is that? You know how to fill the electrons in the molecular orbital, sigma 1s, sigma star 1s, sigma 2s, sigma star 2s. You just have to know the, what is that? You just have to know the order, which orbital should come first, which orbital should come next, right? So that if you know, you can just fill the electrons, and obviously what you're going to do about it, you're going to find something called as bond order, right? So anyways, let me push it in a nutshell. We'll see how it goes, right? Okay, say people, I have an s orbital, assume. Okay, so I have two s orbitals combining together to form a molecular orbital, right? Okay, say, why is it happening like this? Right, okay, so I have an s orbital, another s orbital, and when I say, see, when I say plus, and I put a plus sign in between, that means it is constructive interference. Okay, but there is other ways of doing it also. Say now this is the entirely this thing. Okay, so see, this plus what I wrote here is not talking about the charge. It is talking about the wave. The wave is entirely above the origin. That's what you need to understand. Okay, the wave is entirely above the origin. There is no negative part. You can even put negative, no issues. It's just a representation. Okay, this plus doesn't indicate any charge here. Please do not confuse yourself. Okay, so these are two s orbitals. Okay, now say, now if I put a plus, obviously that means they're going to constructively interfere. Okay, now how is the molecular orbital going to look? Right? So the molecule, one second, am I doing it correct? Yeah. So the molecular orbital is gonna look exactly like this, right? So you formed a bigger orbital like this. Now this is what is called as sigma s. Now if it's 1s, it's going to be called as sigma 1s. If it's 2s, it's going to be called as sigma 2s. Okay, that is the molecular orbital, right? Fine. Now let me move on. We'll go to the next one. Right. Now, if I have destructive interference happening with s orbital, so I have an s orbital, another s orbital. Now I put a negative sign indicating that it is going to be constructive interference. Now you can even do it like this. Instead of putting a negative sign, you can put a positive sign actually, and you can show that this one is negative. So hope you understand what I'm trying to say, right? So this is entirely above the plane, I mean not plane, entirely above the origin, and this is entirely below the origin. So obviously if they interfere, it is definitely going to be a destructive interference. Yes, right? So now how is it going to look? Now this is how it's going to look. The molecular orbital, once again, am I doing it correctly? Yeah, right? Oh, wait. How will this look? Okay, guys, just give me a moment. I'll just come back to this later. We'll see the other one. Obviously, that will come up. Okay, so that's obviously whatever is going to be here is what is called as sigma 2s. Oh, sorry, sigma star 2s, anti-bonding orbital. Okay, I'll give you the shape in a moment. Don't worry. Okay, fine. Now, next, if I go for p orbitals. Okay, now p orbitals, you know, right? P orbitals can involve in sigma bonds, or it can involve in pi bonds. Correct, right? Sigma bonds are going to be head-on overlaps, and the pi bonds are going to be lateral overlaps. So both the things are possible here. So you have three p orbitals, px, py, and pz. Right now, if you take one of them to make a sigma bond, the other two definitely have to make only pi bonds, because you know, right? The first bond always formed is a sigma bond. After that, how many other bonds you form are going to be pi bonds. So it is up to you which you want to take as the sigma bonds. Basically, it all depends on the internuclear axis, right? Say if at all I have a bond, I have something like AB, right? This particular thing is what is called as an internuclear axis. Right, this is the axis, right? So this axis can be anything. Again, it's all how we interpret it. It can be x-axis, it can be y-axis, it can be z-axis. But generally, people do this by convention. They take z-axis always as the internuclear axis. Okay, they take Z axis as the internuclear axis. That means what? The sigma bond can be formed only by PZ, and PX and PY are going to form pi bonds. If you want, you can change it. There is no, there's nothing wrong in doing that. Is that cool? Right, fine. Let me wrap this because we need space. Right, so I am going to take Z axis as my internuclear axis, right? And I'm going to make sure that the sigma bond is formed by PZ, right? Okay, so let me put it like this. Okay, bear with my drawing, guys, right? So again, you can see that I can put a positive sign and a positive sign here, right? You can put a plus also, doesn't matter, right? So what do you see? The positive part and the positive part is interacting, or you can even put negative on both sides. It should be same sign. That's what I'm trying to say. It should not be plus and minus. If it's plus and minus, it's restrictive interference. Okay, so this is my constructive interference, and obviously these are the parts of the wave which is below the origin. So this is how it's gonna look. It's gonna be like this. So I'm going to have a big positive and a small negative this side and this side, right? Okay, so this is the molecular orbital. Right, this is the molecular orbital of what is this? Sigma 2p, I mean, not for sigma pz, I call it. This is my sigma pz. Okay, right? Fine. Now, if I look at the anti-bonding case, right? So this is positive. This is negative, and you can put a positive sign. I mean, adding sign here. That means what? The positive part. I mean, the plane up, the part above the origin and the part below the origin are interacting. That's going to be destructive interference, right? So now, what you see here is you will see something like this. Like obviously, it's going to be almost the same thing. How it's going to look, but little change in shapes might happen. I don't know why this part of the screen is working out like this. Let me draw it right here. So this is my positive, and here in between you have nothing. And guys, I actually got the sigma 2s also. I mean sigma star 2s. This is how it's going to look. This is positive, this is negative. Again, I have nothing in between. Okay, so these are the molecular, obviously this is the negative sign here and here, right? Okay, so this is my sigma star 2pz. Okay, right. Now, if you look at what is exactly happening, right? If you go for your anti-bonding orbital, this is my anti-bonding orbital. This is an anti-bonding orbital. Now, what do you see in common? You are seeing this particular place in the center of these two where I have no electron density, right? So these are what are called as your nodal. This area is really bad, right? So let me write it somewhere here. Okay, these are what are called as nodal planes, right? So always remember, whenever you have an anti-bonding orbital, you will always have a nodal plane, right? And the nodal plane will be perpendicular to the internuclear axis. This is the internuclear axis, right? So where do you see the nodal plane? The nodal plane is perpendicular to this. Okay, so always when you have a sigma bonding anti-bonding orbital, right, you will always have a nodal plane which is perpendicular to the internuclear axis. Is it cool? So you saw sigma 1s means sigma s, sigma star s. You saw sigma pz and sigma star pz. The only thing that is remaining is pi and pi star, right? So let us go into this. Right. So now if I take pi star, I mean, when I take the pi orbitals, obviously, you know how they're going to interact. Right. So this is my say, now it's constructive interference. So obviously the positive part and the positive part, the negative part and the negative part has to interact. Right. This is my positive part. Okay. Positive, positive, negative, negative. This is my constructive interference. Right. So now what do you think will happen? This is how it's going to be. You will see a big positive. You will see a big negative. And obviously now this is my nodal plane. Right? Now this is my pi p x, or it can also be pi p y. It can be either px or py. Both of them will have the same shape. Now what do you see here? Now this is a bonding orbital only. This is not an anti-bonding orbital, but still it has a nodal plane. But the nodal plane here is different, right? Right? What is the difference between the nodal plane in the anti-bonding case and in this case? Can you tell me? Any idea? What is the difference between the nodal plane, horizontal, yeah, horizontal, or if you tell it very technically, right, if you use proper technical words, I will say that it is along, please bear with it guys, I'm really sorry, I don't know why this is happening, I'll just check it. I think the problem is with your stylus only maybe, right? So it is going to be, oh, what happened now? Right. So this is going to be along the this is very irritating. Okay, so write it here. It's along the axis, the internuclear axis. Obviously, this is the internuclear axis. So I can see the nodal plane is parallel to or along the internuclear axis. That's the difference between your anti-bonding sigma and your pi bonding. Okay, now if you have pi star, like if you have anti-bonding of this, right, say, okay, now you have positive here and you have negative here and you have negative here and you have positive here, right? Okay, so this is my negative, so this is my destructive interference, right? Positive negative is interacting, right? So now we'll see what happens there. You will see something like this. Okay, positive, negative, positive, negative. This would have been the shape of your anti-bonding. This is my pi star px or py. Okay, anyways, right? So this is my pi star px or pi star py, right? So now what do you see here? I have two nodal planes, is it not? I have two nodal planes. One, obviously, if you have a bonding orbital, you will have a nodal plane perpendicular to the internuclear axis. And if it's a pi orbital, whether it's bonding or anti-bonding, it is always going to have a nodal plane along the axis. Is it cool? Right? So, like, these are all the different shapes of your what is that? Anti-bonding and bonding molecular orbitals. And obviously, questions might or might not come, but it's good to know. Is that cool? Right? Now, fine. We are done with this. Right? Now we'll directly go for the bond order calculations. You already know what to do. Right? Fine. So I have now. First of all, we'll see the order in which you have to fill the electron. So it starts with sigma 1s, sigma star 1s, sigma 2s, sigma star 2s, right? Okay, then I have pi 2px equal to pi 2py. Then you have sigma 2pz. Then you have pi star 2px. Okay, now this I'm not writing this side. Let it go. Right. So this after this I will have sigma to sorry. It's pi star. Right. So after this I will have pi star 2px equal to pi star 2py, and last I have sigma star 2pz. Okay, so this is the order in which you have to fill the electron. Start with sigma 1s, sigma star 1s, sigma 2s, sigma star 2s, pi 2px equal to pi 2py, sigma 2pz, pi star 2px equal to pi star 2py, and last sigma 2pz, sigma star 2pz. Right? So all the rules which you follow for filling the electrons in the atomic orbitals, same thing has to be followed. Aufbau's principle, Pauli's exclusion principle, Hund's rule of maximum multiplicity, all those things has to be followed. First of all, you have to put, say, for example, if I have only 2 electrons, you will put both the electrons here. If I have, say, 3 or 4 electrons, you'll put the next one. And the only thing which you have to remember is when I go for this pi orbitals, pi 2px and pi 2py, right? You first have to put 1 and 1 first, then only have to put 2 and 2. Hope you remember this. This is like p orbitals. No, all these have same energy. These two have same energy. So what do you do in p orbitals? In p orbital, first you singly pair them, singly put them, then you go for pairing. Correct. Now same thing has to happen here also. Right? You put 1 and 1, then you pair it. 2 and 2. Same goes here also. Other things are fine. Directly put 2, 2, 2, 2, then it's over. Okay, right? So that's about the order. Wait, I forgot one thing. Now this has to be used when the total atomic number or total number of electrons is less than 14, less than 15. Okay, so less than 15 for C2, B2, H2, all these things you can use this. If you have Z greater than 15, there's a small change will be, the smaller change will be, this will be exactly same. This will also be exactly same. The only thing which will change is these two, right? So let me start with sigma star 2s. After that, you will have sigma 2pz and you will have pi 2px equal to pi 2py. Yeah, so this alone you take it. Okay, fine. So like what I said, sigma star 2s, sigma 2pz, basically this came here, and basically this alone you interchange these two. Rest all are going to be very similar. Very similar, it is exactly same. Right? So this is the only thing you have to remember. This is for Z greater than 15. Whenever the total number of electrons is greater than 15. right? Then you to go for this particular order. Please do not forget this. Lot of times, lot of people does mistake in this. They will forget this particular aspect and they'll try to calculate and everything will be wrong, right? Okay, I hope how you are going to fill the electrons here. Like I think I don't have to give you any examples, right? What I have to tell you is next thing is about the magnetic properties, right? So again, I don't want to go in depth because we are not going to spend. You just have to know that when you have paramagnetic, right? For when you what can be paramagnetic species? Why the hell it's happening like this? I have no clue. Okay, let me try to write with this. Right? So paramagnetic species, they have unpaired electrons, as simple as that. Right? They have unpaired electrons. Okay. Now, say for example, I'll take O2 molecule. Right? Now let me fill the electrons in the molecular orbital. So O2 basically has 8 as atomic number, totally 16 electrons. Okay, I have to make sure that I have 16 electrons in the orbital. So I have sigma 1s2, sigma star 1s2, sigma 2s2, sigma star 2s2. And now it's more than 15, right? So obviously you have to put what? Put sigma 2pz2 here, and then you have to go for pi 2px equal to pi 2py, right? Done. So how many? 1 2 3 4 5. I mean 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So now I have to put okay, first I have to put one electron, then two electrons. Now I can directly put it. Not a big deal because both of them are completely filled. Now what do you have after this? I have pi star. So after this, I have pi star 2px equal to pi star 2py. Right? Now, what can I say about this? Now you have almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now 14 electrons are filled. 2 more electrons have to be filled out, and these are degenerate orbitals in the sense they have same energy. So obviously you have to put 1 and 1. This is how you fill the electrons, right? Now what do you see here? These are having unpaired electrons in pi and pi star. So obviously O2 is going to be paramagnetic in nature. And if you don't see any such thing, right? If you don't see any unpaired electron, then it becomes diamagnetic. Diamagnetic. Okay, right? So that's okay. That's about paramagnetic and diamagnetic. And last, you have to know this. That is my bond order, BO. Now that's very easy formula. Half into number of electrons in bonding orbital minus number of electrons in anti-bonding orbital. That's it. Now, if you want to calculate the bond order for O2, you can calculate. So it will be 1 by 2 into how many electrons in bonding? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 10 electrons minus how many electrons in anti-bonding? 1, 2, 4. Sorry, I mean 6, right? So 2, 4, 5, 6, totally 6. 10, and this is 6. So 10 minus 6 will be 4. 4 by 2 will be 2. So the bond order is 2. Right? Now, what and all you can predict with bond order, that also I'll tell you. Right? So bond order, BO, if you know that, it is going to be directly proportional to the bond strength. Right? And it is obviously bond strength means it is going to have lesser bond length. Right? And bond strength, bond length, yeah, these two alone you have to know. Okay, more bond order means more bond strength. Obviously, it talks about the number of bonds in the molecule, right? So more bond order means more bond strength, and obviously stronger bonds will have smaller bond lengths. That we know already, right? Now, obviously, one more thing is more bond order, more and more is the stability of the molecule. This is the most important thing. right? So more and more is the bond order. You have to remember that more and more is the stability. Okay, now let me give you a question, and if you solve it, I have Li2 and I have Li2 minus, and say I have Li2 1 plus. Okay, so I have these three with me, right? Now I want you to arrange them in the order of stability. Go for it. I have Li2, Li2 minus, 1 minus, and Li2 plus. See, it's not Li2 plus, not 2 is not the charge. See, please remember, we are talking about molecular orbital theory. So we are not going to deal with at atoms anymore, right? We are going to see only in terms of molecules as such, right? So take some time and decide what is the order of stability of Li2, Li2 minus, and Li2 plus. Obviously, what you have to do when they ask you about stability, you have to go for calculation of bond order. Just go calculate. And guys, I think today I'll be finishing the class a little early. Okay. I think I'll complete this chapter, and I think I can, I think 8, 10, 8, 15, I'll complete it. I have some work. Okay. Like, since I'm not able to see you, obviously I know that you're happy. Right. Okay. Did he first step is to calculate the bond orders of all the things. Did he calculate the bond order? What is bond order of Li2? Maybe in the chat. What is it? 213. Li. So you're telling, just give me a yes if I'm what I'm saying is right. You're telling Li2 minus will have more stability. When did you say there's no time even available? Okay. Are you answering this question, Siddharth? Whatever I asked you now. Okay. So that means you're telling Li2 minus is more stable than Li2, and that is more stable than Li2 plus. Okay. Right. Fine. So first, tell me, do me a favor. Tell me the bond order for all of these. What is Li2's bond order? Half. Okay. We'll check that. Fine. Now lithium has 6 electrons, right? So if you have 6 electrons, I can write it as sigma 1s2, sigma star 1s2, and sigma 2s2. Right? Lithium has 3, so Li2 will have 6. Right? So now if we calculate the bond order, that will be half into now what do you have? 4 electrons minus 2 electrons here. So 4 minus 2 will be 2. 2 by 2 will be 1. How did you get 0.5? Siddharth, calculation somewhere wrong. Right? So 1 by 2, normal, right? Number of electrons in bonding minus number of electrons in anti-bonding. Totally 6 electrons. This is how I fill, and this is the calculation. Bond order is 1 for Li2. Right? Now, if I have Li2 minus, or first we'll calculate for Li2 plus. Right? Now, if you take it for Li2 plus, now what will happen? Instead of this 2, you will have 1. Right? So now what will happen? It will become 0.5. Now is it 0.5? Now if you calculate, you will find, if you calculate, you will find the bond order of Li2 plus to be 0.5. Right? Okay. Now if it is going to be Li2 minus, now what will happen? Li2 minus will have 2, and you have to add extra 1 electron also. 7 electrons should be there. Right? So it will be sigma star 2s1, right? Sigma 1s, sigma star 1s, sigma 2s, and sigma star 2s, and last 1, right? Now again, if you calculate, so you have 4, right? 4 minus 3, 3 again 0.5. So you'll see that this is also having 0.5 and this is having 1. Okay, now obviously, now we'll come back to that Li2 minus and Li2 plus later, but definitely what I can say for sure is Li2 is having maximum stability. Yes, right? Okay, now if you look at this, both of them have same bond order. Okay, now please take a note, write a note. I'm going to give you a statement. Please take it down. When two species have same bond order, when two species have same bond order, the species with more electrons in the anti-bonding orbitals, the species with more number of electrons in anti-bonding orbital is less stable, right? Again, I repeat, right? If the bond order is same for two species, right? The one which is having more number of electrons in anti-bonding orbital is unstable, is less stable, right? Or in other words, you can even write the statement like this. If the bond order is same, right? If the bond order is same, the one with more number of electrons in bonding orbitals is more stable. Right? Hope you get my statement. I should have more number of for higher stability. I should have more electrons in bonding orbital and lesser number of electrons in anti-bonding orbital. And this particular thing you will use only on and only if you have same bond order. Okay, if you have same bond order, and then only you will be using it. Okay, so now if that's the case, now tell me, you can see that in Li2 minus, you had one extra electron in the anti-bonding orbital, 2s1, sigma star 2s1. But it had just, this had just sigma 2s1. This had same number of, wait, how to say, this had extra one electron in the anti-bonding orbital, Li2 minus, right? So now what will be the order then? Li2 plus, then you have Li2 minus. Yes. Now I want S from everybody. Everybody understood? Oh, now you have so much strength. Where did you guys come from? When I started the class, nobody was here. Okay, fine. Right. So everybody understood? I want a S from everybody, guys.
Yes.
For this. Right. Okay. 2, I got yes. Yes. 3, 4, 5. One more, 6. Wonderful. Right? Thank you, guys. Right? So everybody understood. Right? Oh God. Yeah. Right? So yeah, that is about the molecular orbital theory. Right? It's pretty simple. Very, very simple. If you get a problem from molecular orbital theory, it's like eating a sweet, like cake. Like you just labak, put it inside, get the marks. Right? Fine. So one last thing is left, and how much time? Okay, I can finish it, but or what should I do? Okay, fine. No, guys, I think I'll finish it. Like how much? It's a small part. Like I just have to talk to you about the secondary bonds. All the primary types of bonds, all these things are over, right? All these things, everything you now know now. Now, what you don't know is when I started this chapter, I told you that. The entire bonds in chemistry can be divided into two types. One is what is called as primary types of bonds. The other one is what is called as secondary types of bonds, right? So we saw all things about primary bonds. So what is the difference between primary and secondary? Obviously, in primary, I have 100% rearrangement in the electron configuration. The electron is completely lost or completely gained or completely shared, something like that, right? So that happens in the case of your primary bonds. In secondary bond, no, it is not exactly like that, right? It is going to be a partial rearrangement of the electronic configuration. That means the electron is not completely out of the atom, not exactly. It's just little displaced from its original position. That is how it is, right? Okay, So when we see what are all the types of when I see what are all the types of secondary bonds I can have, just let me list it down. Right. So you have something called as dipole interactions, and you have something called as dipole ion interaction, and at last you have something, the most important of them all. I think the problem is with stylus, not with the screen. Because if I'm I'm inverting the pen and writing, and it's writing properly. Okay, anyways, I'll just look into it. But today, please bear with me, people. Right? So you have dipole interactions, dipole ion interactions, and hydrogen bonding. Okay, now as I told you, these are going to be similar. These are going to be secondary types of bonds where the electrons are not completely out of the shell exactly, right? And what you have to understand is these are molecular interactions. These are molecular interaction. What do you mean by molecular interaction? Now, till now we saw how two atoms come together to make a bond. That is a proper chemical bond, right? Now here I have already bonds formed and everything is set, right? But between two molecules, between two compounds, I am going to have some interaction. Obviously, right? Say you have in a glass of water, right? How many water molecules will be there? Billions and trillions of water molecules will be there. How they're able to stay together? Right? Say if you have HCl acid with you or HF acid with you, obviously obviously there'll be so many molecules of HF or HCl in that particular beaker, right? How are they able to stay together? Right? So those answers are going to be given by all of these. That's why we call them as molecular interactions, right? In the sense, between two molecules, I'm going to have interactions happening, not in between two atoms. If it happens between two atoms, then it is going to be a proper chemical bond. That is your primary bond. Okay, now if I look at dipole, it's pretty simple. We already know what is dipole moment, right? Now obviously this can happen. Dipole or dipole ion is almost similar. I think everything is almost similar, but I can just see it, right? So dipole, if you check, I need to have two dipoles. That's what it says. From the name itself, I can understand, right? So when can dipole come into the picture? On and only if you have polar types of bonds, right? So obviously we know what are polar types of bonds. I should have high difference in electronegativity between the bonding atoms. If that's there, you will know that some charge separation will happen, del negative, del positive, if that will come, and that is what is going to be called as dipole. Correct. Now the best example I can take is this. When I take HF, right, and let me take another HF molecule. Right, now what happens in this? Obviously fluorine is more electronegative, so there'll be a partial negative charge here, there'll be a partial positive charge here. Again, same thing to this molecule also. Now what will happen? These two are nearby. This del positive and this del negative are going to have some kind of interaction. Again, I can have molecules this side also, molecules this side also. So this is exactly what is called as your dipole. This is a dipole, this is another dipole, and between two dipoles I have an interaction. Pretty simple, right? Fine. Now what happens with, now what about this? What do you mean by dipole ion interactions? Right, now very simple, right? Say I'll take an example. I have sodium chloride salt. Okay, now I'm going to dissolve the sodium chloride salt in water. Okay, now sodium chloride will be in crystal form, obviously when it's in solid form. When I'm going to dissolve it, I'm going to produce the ions. What ions? Na plus ions and Cl minus ions, right? Now what is going to happen is you have Na plus ion, right? And you have Cl minus ion. Now what is going to happen is you have water molecules. So obviously you have water molecules present, and that water molecule is also polar, isn't it? So if you can remember, obviously H. Now this is a del positive, this is del negative, this is again del positive, right? So what you can understand is this full negative charge and the partial negative charge on oxygen can have some kind of interaction. All right. So what do you see here? This is the complete ion and this is a dipole. This particular here is a dipole. right? So this is my dipole ion interaction, and this is how you see when I go for solutions this chapter, you are already studied in your 12th class. Then I think you will be able to actually really appreciate what exactly is this, right? On see, if you can remember, for me to not remember, if you have to know this, if you want to make a solution, right? If you want to make a solution, so solute will be completely different, solvent will be entirely different, right? Okay, now obviously the solute interactions will be there, solvent interactions will be there. Now when you try to make a solution, right, I will have solute solvent interactions, right? The solute and solvent are going to interact. Now what you have to understand is, if you want to make a good solution, if you want high solubility, and if you don't want to spend so much energy in making that solution, right? What you have to make sure, that the solute solvent interactions are stronger than the solute and solvent interactions. That means when you make the solution, right, the forces existing between the solute and the solvent should be very stronger than the previous ones. That is, when I had only solute, only solvent, this interaction should be greater. Only then I can say that will be highly dissolved in that particular solvent. That particular solute can highly dissolve in that particular solvent. Now these are the extra interactions which help sodium chloride or any other polar species get dissolved in water, right? You will have extra interactions like this other than the normal van der Waals force. I'll tell you, okay, actually under this you have van der Waals force also. Okay, we'll speak about it, no problem, right? So other than the normal van der Waals force, if you have these kind of interactions, that is actually going to help the molecule get dissolved in a very stronger manner. It's highly dissolved. That's all I can say. Right now, same thing will happen for chlorine also. Right now, what will happen? This time it's going to come from H plus. I mean H del plus, oxygen, del plus, del minus. Again, I can have full negative charge, and your hydrogen is del positive. Right. So again, this is not like only one molecule is going to surround this, or the only one molecule is going to surround Cl minus or Na plus. There'll be so many water molecules surrounding like this. So many. Okay. So this is what is called as your dipole ion interaction. Interaction between a dipole and a proper ion, cation or anion, doesn't matter. Okay. I don't think I will have time to finish hydrogen bonding. So guys, we'll stop with this for today. Okay, so hydrogen bonding alone I'll take up next class, that is tomorrow's class. Okay, and we'll talk about van der Waals force also, and then we are done with this chapter. And next chapter we'll be going to is thermodynamics. Okay, so we did one organic chapter, we did one inorganic chapter, so we'll do a physical chapter. Okay, so we'll go for thermodynamics next class. Any questions, people? Any questions from whatever we saw today? A lot of people joined late. Any questions? Maybe in the chat.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool then. Bye guys. We'll meet again tomorrow. Right? Thank you so much. Please be soon for next classes. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.